I love that femininity about a woman who can be educated and strong, a woman who is powerful, but yet she's able to be submissive to her husband, to her family, to his business partners, or to strangers. I think that's so beautiful. It doesn't take away from her. It just shows that she's cultured and she has a lot of feminine qualities about her. I love that so much. And I actually learned a lot about just hosting because I love to have parties and get together. And so I know from that experience when I'm greeting someone, I know to offer them some water or some slippers and just to tend to them so that they feel welcomed. And that's something that I really appreciated a lot.
Cool. Very nice. I mean, you absorb the positive parts, no? That's normally what it remains the longest if you don't have a bad experience. And as far as you're saying, Japan was a very nice time for you. You said you were pretty young when you did this first like the board, like when you presented yourself to Elle in Japan. You were a teenager still, so was that the moment that you
Yes.
moved?
Yeah. So I was living in Japan when I signed with the agency, and I remember like jumping on a train because in Europe as well as in Japan, the transportation system is so refined that a lot of people either are riding bicycles or they're taking trains. And you could go from point A to point B, no problem. So I was just a teenager jumping on a train, going to my castings, and I just got it figured out. But that was the first time that I learned truly how to navigate not only the train railway system, but also have the courage to just figure things out for myself. And I really appreciate that experience because now I can go into any country and know that I can do it. Like I can discover cities without being scared. I don't have to have someone hold my hand. I can literally figure it out for myself. Some of the negative things that I should mention about going to a new country or learning, some of the habits in countries are unfortunate, like smoking cigarettes. That's something that's so prevalent in Europe as well as in Japan. And I remember as a kid, I wanted to try it so bad. I did try smoking a cigarette and I didn't like it, but I thought that that was the coolest thing you could do. And I would see the models with long Virginia Slim cigarettes and they're skinny and pretty and smoking. And I'm like, this is what you're supposed to look like. And so that would be one negative thing that, I would say would be a takeaway is sometimes the culture influences you to do things that may not be quite good for your health.
Smoking definitely is one, not the good one, that's for sure. And
Oh
yes, actually, I
yeah.
think Japanese smoke a lot. Yes, it's true. Like it's also a cultural thing. Yeah. Um,
hmm
how it was like because I'm like when you are a teenager and you enter, you're signing a contract at the end. Signing with an agency, it's nothing else than your first professional contract with
hmm
someone, I assume. Um, I at that point of time, I suppose your parents stayed in the United States and you traveled there alone. How was the support from the agency? How does this system works around you? They did support you. They I don't know, provide you with the home and the food, or what? How does it work?
I know. Well, actually, my parents we were living and stationed in Japan. So I
Ah,
lived at home with my
cool,
parents while I was able to
nice.
explore this whole new world. But I did get a contract from my agency to travel to Malaysia. It was a short-term
Hmm.
temporary contract. I remember taking this contract home to my parents, and my parents both looked at me like, absolutely not. They're going to sell you. And I'm like, no, it's legitimate. I'm going to Malaysia just for this temporary contract. And I remember thinking my dreams had completely died because my parents said no to me. But looking back, I'm so happy that they said no because human trafficking does exist and they knew
Hmm.
better, but I didn't know better. At least when I was in Japan, I could go to a casting and I could come back home, right? No one's going to steal me, but if I lived abroad, I just don't think that as a kid you have that resistance from temptation. So maybe
Hmm.
I would who knows where I would be, right? So I definitely think it's important for parents, especially now that I have my own kids. I would never let my kids go abroad without supervision. I'd have to go with them.
Makes sense. What
Hmm.
about language? Because that's one of the big ones. I don't know, like you were speaking Japanese at that point of time, or how did you communicate in the whole
Yes,
environment?
yes. So during my studies, I took Japanese for 4 years,
Wow.
so I could write informal Japanese hiragana, katakana, kanji. You know, there's like 2,000 characters in kanji, which is like the Chinese, like basically like pictures. Korean, Chinese, Japanese basically share that kanji. And I learned up to 150 of them, which is impressive. Don't ask me to do it for you today because I don't remember. But yeah, I was just speaking fluently. And I also took temporary jobs. I worked at a bakery in Japan where I worked behind the scenes in the kitchen, washing fruit and decorating pastries. So I definitely believe if you're going to go to a country, take the time to learn the language, learn the culture. There's so many free apps. Even Google, you could ask Google how to say this in this language and it'll translate it for you. But life is easier
Mm,
when you know the language.
absolutely. I think integration it's a very valuable thing, or at least trying. I mean, I'm not saying that you fully integrate
Hmm.
in 1 year to a new culture. It's probably impossible, but as soon as
Hmm.
you, especially these cultures where the language is so different, when they realize you're doing the effort of trying to speak their languages and everything, I think their perspective on you changes really fast, and they start accepting you much faster also. um
Hmm.
was it help, like how was the cultural shock for you in Japan? I mean, you said you were living in Korea, but I suppose it's also different. It's not the same. I assume it's a little
Hmm.
bit easier because it's not someone coming from United States and suddenly being in Japan, which is opposite cultures, and the culture shock is a little bit
Hmm.
reduced. But do you remember having a culture shock when you arrived to Japan first?
I did. What's really shocking to me is the Japanese people. They really admire Europeans and Americans. So American European fashion styling was very prevalent. So I would see beautiful Japanese women and men with blonde hair, and it was almost
Oh,
like they were trying to escape their heritage by all the celebrity styles that you see in magazines. So I realized that it's prevalent. Fashion is so prevalent in Japan. The other thing that was shocking to me was the cost of food, the cost of clothing was out of
mm,
this world because the yen was so strong. I'll give you an example. An apple, although Japan does a great job with their fruit, so the fruit's always packaged in like some styrofoam cellophane. And
mm.
can you imagine the most beautiful apple and it's $5? So one apple is
Ooh,
$5. Yes,
oh,
that's
okay.
just the idea of the cost of food there. So, having access to fruits and vegetables was very hard. Having access to protein like steak, chicken,
Mm,
extremely difficult. And everything that they sell is very small, like cut thin, not even the best part
mm.
of the beef. So, you really have to make a lot of money to live a really good life there. It's not easy.
Okay. I wasn't expecting that it would be that expensive. Like, well, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Where were you in Japan
Hmm.
exactly? You were in Tokyo,
So I
or?
lived I lived in Kanagawa area, so I was
Mhm.
about an hour away from Tokyo, and I lived on a base called Camp Sama. So I went to an international high school there, also went to middle school
Mhm.
there, and primarily they were all military folks that lived on the base. But as a military family, you could have access in and outside the gate. The gates inside a military base are secured, so not everybody can just walk in. You literally have to go through security, show your
Mhm.
identification, or if you're a guest, they have to verify who you are to enter to the military bases.
I see. So you you didn't quit studying, like you continued studying while you were working as a model in Japan, or
Oh yeah,
how many
absolutely.
how how old were you at that moment of time? Like also because you said 14 it's a very young age. Like it's
Yes, yes. So I moved to Japan when I was 13 years old, and I stayed there till I was about 19. So I was there for a good
okay.
chunk of my life. That was actually the longest station that my dad had, and it was ironic that soon after that, when the military forced us to go back to the USA because he took a promotion as Command Sergeant Major of the U.S. Army, which is one of the
Hmm.
highest positions of leadership that he could obtain as an immigrant. It was shortly after that that he decided he wanted to retire. So I had a good
Okay.
stint in Japan, and since I had such a great time international, I just have this desire to travel the world. And some of the places that I do hope to visit in the future, when the wars die down, I'd love to go to Jerusalem. I would love to go
Mhm.
to Belarus, and I would love to travel to Greece. These are some of the areas that are on my wish list.
Well, I, I'm in Athens right now, so if you come around, like Greece, it's always welcoming. I mean, it started to be the 2 months of winter that or 3 months that we have here, so
Oh,
don't
really?
expect it. But it's not that long the
Oh,
winter
wow.
here, so it's always lovely. But I mean, winter. I'm talking about 13 degrees now at
Uh-huh.
night, so it's not that cold either. But it's
Uh-huh.
Greece. It's you've never been to Greece?
No, I tried to go to Greece. So
Okay.
when I was in Italy, so I spent some time in Milano, and I went to Lake Como, and then went to Venice, and I was like, I'm
Mm,
gonna fly to Greece, and because it's not too far, and I remember trying to book my flight. But the challenge wasn't getting there. The challenge was the flights from Greece back to the USA was like a 34-hour trip. So I
yes.
decided I'm just going to wait till another time where I could just fly directly to Greece and maybe go to Greece, go to Rome, just take my time to really enjoy the beautiful country. But I love food. So one of my favorite foods is actually Mediterranean. And while I was just in New York City this past, I just got back from New York the other day. We went to a fabulous restaurant called Milo's, and it's very famous in the US because they have all the seafood presented on ice. So when you go to the
Mm,
restaurant, you look at your menu. It's like fish, all kinds of fresh seafood, fresh tomatoes, um, because the tomatoes taste different when they're fresh. So that's why I love
mm.
Mediterranean food because it's so fresh, right? And everything tastes good. So I hope when I go to Greece, I'm not disappointed because sometimes when you eat
You will not.
certain foods, you will like, oh wow, it tastes different in Mexico because Mexican food in the USA tastes different than when
Yeah.
you go to Mexico. But in Greece, it's probably better, right? Like better for you, better olive oil, salts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a bit different, like with the Mexican food and some Asian food, they do a variant because the ingredients are difficult to find. I don't know if in the US it's the
Hmm.
same, but for example, here in Europe, when you go to Mexican restaurants, generically it's Tex-Mex. So it's basically
Hmm.
tacos, but it's not the way that it will do it. It's more like the Texan approach to Mexican food, actually. With
Hmm.
Asian, the same, especially Indian, they need to reduce the spiciness because if not, people will not buy it. So when you go to India, when you go to Mexico, and you try the dishes, they are very different. If you liked this short video out of the full episode, you can find the link to it around here and in the description below. Of course, if you are also interested in checking out other episodes, please subscribe and like.